The surgeon had barely signed my discharge papers when I looked at my son and said, "The investments failed, the money is gone." James's hand went still on the arm of the hospital chair. His wife, Tanya, stood near the window with a leather folder tucked under her arm, and her face shifted in a way I had learned to read over 12 years of watching her. The warmth left first. Then the calculation arrived. "Gone," she repeated, not a question. I pressed my palm against the bed rail and looked at the ceiling. The GICs matured at the wrong time. The market accounts dropped. I may have enough in my checking for 2 or 3 months, but not much beyond that. Outside the window of the Victoria General Hospital, Halifax was bright and cold under a February sky. It was just after 1 in the afternoon. I had told myself I would know everything I needed to know before supper. My name is Gloria Watts. I am 67 years old, and I had just spent 4 days recovering from a hip replacement. The surgery had gone well. My physiotherapist told me so 3 times, but recovery was slow. I could not drive or manage stairs without help for several weeks. That was the practical reality. The other reality, the one I had been quietly building toward for months, was the test I had just set in motion. My husband Frank died 6 years ago. For nearly 30 years, we had run a small property management company together out of Dartmouth. Frank started it with a single 4-unit building he inherited from his father, and by the time we sold the company in 2019, we had 17 residential properties across the Halifax regional municipality. The sale brought in just over $2 million after taxes. Combined with our registered accounts, the rental income from 2 properties we kept, and the equity in our home on Jubilee Road, my total assets sat at roughly $2.8 million Canadian. No one in my family knew that number. They knew Frank and I had been comfortable. They did not know comfortable meant what it meant. I had not hidden the money out of shame. I had hidden it because I watched Frank's sister spend 15 years being treated differently by her children, the moment her late husband left her a sizable estate. People do not become different people when they learn about money. They simply become more honest about who they already were. For most of our marriage, I believe James was the exception. He called every week. He showed up when the furnace broke, and when I had a bad flu the January after Frank passed and could not get out of bed. He sat at my kitchen table and told me I would never be alone. When he married Tanya 8 years later, I welcomed her. She brought energy into the house, and I told myself that was a quality, not a warning. Tanya's warmth, I came to understand, had terms attached. She remembered my birthday when she needed a favor. She called me Glow in that easy, familiar way when she wanted something softened. Her 2 sons, Kurt and Wade, were adults from her first marriage. Kurt was 35 and worked in commercial sales. Wade was 32 and had tried 3 different ventures in 5 years. I had helped with 2 of them. A loan for a food truck that failed. A cosign on a commercial lease that I quietly paid off when the business folded. Each time, Tanya thanked me with both hands on my arm and her eyes very warm. Each time she came back inside a year with something new. The first sign that something had changed came the previous September. We were sitting at her kitchen table when Tanya asked, in the casual tone she used for dangerous questions, whether I had updated my power of attorney since Frank died. I said the existing one still stood. She asked whether it named the right people. When I asked what she meant by the right people, she said James should have full authority, not just medical but financial, and that waiting until I was incapacitated was not the smart approach. I said I would think about it. I called my solicitor, Mr. Lapointe, that same evening. I asked him to review my accounts and property records for anything unusual. He found that someone had requested assessment records on both of my remaining rental properties. The request had come through a numbered company registered to Wade. A second inquiry had gone to my property manager, asking about the condition of the Dartmouth condo, whether it was ready to list, and what it might fetch in the current market. My property manager had not replied, but he had called to tell me. I said nothing to James or Tanya. I watched. Then I slipped on the icy back step in January and the socket of my hip broke. The night before my surgery, Tanya came to the hospital and reorganized my overnight bag without asking. She spoke to the nurse on duty about my pain levels in a way that positioned her as the authority, and me as someone whose own account of her symptoms needed a secondary source. I noticed, but I did not object. I was already thinking about what would happen when I was discharged. I had already made the call to Mr. Lapointe. I had already asked him to prepare a statement, simple, plausible, saying my investments had collapsed. I had already arranged for Ellen, a private nurse from a home care agency in Bedford, to wait for my call. What I had not done was stopped loving my son. I want to be clear about that. I was still hoping to be wrong. At 1:15, they wheeled me out to James's car. He was quiet on the drive to Jubilee Road, Tanya sat in the back and asked me twice whether I had given any further thought to the power of attorney. I said the medication made it difficult to concentrate. She said we would talk at home. The house smelled of cleaning products when we arrived. Tanya had been there the day before, she told me. She helped me to the sofa. The side door to the backyard had a new lock. I noticed immediately because I had used that door every morning for 22 years to take my tea into the yard. I asked about it. Tanya said the old one was stiff and she'd had it replaced while she was cleaning. The new key was not on my ring. She handed it to James, who held it without looking at me. The mail had been stacked in a neat pile on the side table. The top envelope was from the Royal Bank. Tanya reached for it before I could. I told her that was private correspondence. She said, "We're family, Glo. You shouldn't be managing this alone right now." James said I was tired and asked her not to push. I could not tell which of us he was speaking to. By 2:30, Tanya had moved to the kitchen. The door was not fully closed. Her voice carried through the gap, low and deliberate. "The POA isn't signed yet," she said. I know. But if the accounts are empty, the properties are the only thing worth moving on. Wade's contact can have the Dartmouth place assessed by Thursday. We just need the access form signed first. She's medicated and she's tired. Tonight is the right time." I sat with my hands in my lap and looked at the gray light coming through the front window. The money had been gone in her mind for less than 2 hours, and she had already divided the pieces. At 3 o'clock, James came in with a manila folder and sat across from me. He looked at the floor before he looked at me. "Mum," he said, "we've found something that might help. There's a long-term care home in Truro. It's not a luxury place, but it's well run and they have a room. It could be temporary." I asked whether he had looked into home care. He said it was expensive. I asked who would pay for it. He said that was the problem. If my accounts were depleted, the practical solution was somewhere manageable and let the house situation resolve itself. I asked who would stay at the house while I was in Truro. He said someone should be nearby, in case things came up with the property. I understood what he meant. I asked him to say it plainly. He looked at the folder instead. Tanya appeared in the doorway carrying the folder she had brought to the hospital. She placed it on the coffee table in front of me. 5 pages. The first page read General Power of Attorney at the top, with my name printed below it. I turned to page 4 without comment. It assigned to James authority over my real property, my banking and investment accounts, my mail, and my medical decisions. It was not described as temporary. There was no end date. I set the folder back on the table. "I won't be signing that," I said. Tanya's voice changed. Not loud. Sharper. "You are not in a position to manage your own affairs right now. That is simply the reality. We are trying to help you do what you cannot do alone." I asked her to bring me a glass of water. She did not move. James leaned forward. "Mum, please, think about what happens if something goes wrong and no one has legal authority to act for you. Then I recover and act for myself." Tanya leaned toward me from across the table. "Gloria." She only used my full name when she wanted me to understand. She was not asking. "You will sign this tonight or we will have to begin making decisions without your input. The house, the condo. We cannot leave you here with no resources and no plan in place." That was the moment I knew the day had stopped being a test. She had moved past persuasion into something else entirely. At 4 o'clock, James told me the care home in Truro had a room and could take me that evening if they called by 5. There was a bag near the stairs. My bag, my clothes folded without my permission, packed without my knowledge. My jewelry box was not on the bedroom dresser where I kept it. I asked where it was. Tanya said she had put it somewhere safe, so it would not be knocked over during the move. I asked her to bring it to me. She said I could get it once I was settled. I said, "Bring me my jewelry box." She said, "You're not listening to reason right now." My mother's pearl and garnet brooch was in that box. It had come to me when she passed, and it was not worth much to anyone who didn't know its history. It was worth everything to me. At 4:30, Tanya stepped to the backyard and made a second call. She stood with her back to the window, but the glass carried sound. She mentioned the Jubilee Road property and said the owner was transitioning to care. She said she needed a market evaluation by the end of the week. She said, "The family is managing the transition." I reached into the pocket of my housecoat and found my phone. "Mr. Lapointe," I said when he answered, "I need you at the house now." I sent a text to Ellen. Tanya came back inside before I had put the phone down. She looked at it. "Who was that?" "My solicitor." "This is a family matter, Glo." "It stopped being a family matter when you called a realtor." James went very still. Mr. Lapointe arrived at 5:15 with Ellen behind him. Ellen carried a medical bag and a manner that gave away nothing except competence. Mr. Lapointe set his card on the coffee table and identified himself as my solicitor of record. He said he represented the property owner and that the accounts in question were fully intact. He placed a document on the table. It confirmed the current balances in my registered accounts, the ownership of the Jubilee Road property and the Dartmouth condo, and my existing care arrangement, which included home nursing, physiotherapy, a full recovery plan that required no facility placement of any kind. James read the first page, then he read it again. "The money was never gone," I said. Tanya laughed. It sounded nothing like her usual laugh. "You fabricated this. You set the whole thing up to make us look like." "To look like what?" I asked. She could not complete the sentence. Mr. Lapointe explained that the security camera system installed at the property last November had been recording since I arrived home. The footage included the kitchen phone call, the presentation of the power of attorney document, and the removal of the jewelry box from the bedroom. He said the box needed to be returned immediately and its contents reviewed in his presence. Tanya's face went the color of old paper. Ellen went to the bedroom and returned with the box. The lid was slightly crooked. When I opened it, the pearl and garnet brooch was not there. I looked at Tanya. She said she had not touched it. Mr. Lapointe said the hallway camera had recorded her entering the bedroom at 2:47 that afternoon. She reached into her cardigan pocket and placed the brooch on the table. James sat down on the footstool as though his legs had simply stopped working. "What were you doing?" he said. Not a question, a statement directed at the floor. "I was making sure it didn't get lost," she said. "There is no move," he said, quietly. It was the first thing he had said all day that sounded like himself. I told them they needed to leave before 7. The care home admission had never been booked, because I had never agreed to it. The power of attorney document was not valid, and Mr. Lapointe would be noting the circumstances of its presentation in writing. Ellen would stay the night. New locks would be installed in the morning. Tanya said I had treated them like suspects in their own family. I said I had treated them like people whose actions I needed to understand. She said I would regret testing the people who loved me. I looked at the February dark beyond the window. It comes early in Halifax in winter. By 5 o'clock the harbor has already gone black. I regret not paying closer attention sooner, I said. James set the side door key on the table before they walked out. He did not look at me when he did it. That night, Lucy came. She was 26 and worked as a social worker with the Halifax School Board, and she was James' daughter from an early marriage that had ended before I fully understood its shape. We had been close since she was small. When Ellen called her at my request, she arrived in 40 minutes wearing her work clothes, carrying a box of crackers and a container of soup she had made in her own kitchen. She sat beside me and did not ask about money. She asked whether I was in pain. She asked whether I was frightened. She stayed until I fell asleep, and when I woke in the night, the lamp in the hall was still on, because she had left it that way deliberately. 3 weeks later, James came back alone. He sat at the kitchen table with his coat still on and told me that Tanya had been carrying credit card debt he had not known about, borrowed against their line of credit to maintain appearances. Wade's supplement company, the one she had expected me to fund, had already failed before my surgery. He said he had known none of it. I believed him about most of it. He signed a correction to the property inquiry that Wade had filed, in Mr. Lapointe's presence, at the Dartmouth condo. He returned every copied document. Tanya came to that meeting and stood near the door as though the room belonged to someone else. She refused to sign the correction until Mr. Lapointe read aloud from the security footage transcript. Then her hand moved and she signed. That signature did not repair anything. It only stopped a false record from traveling further than it already had. I revised the estate plan. Lucy received a protected trust structured to be inaccessible to claims from her father or anyone connected to his household. A significant portion of my estate was directed to a fund for seniors housing in Nova Scotia, specifically to support people who needed home care after surgery but had been left without family help. A social worker at the QEII Foundation had told me the need was larger than most people realized and growing every year. The first fund placement went to a retired schoolteacher in Dartmouth, who came home from knee surgery, to find her nephew had cleared out her apartment and left for Alberta. We paid for a nurse, a meal service, and 3 months of housing stability while she found her footing. She sent me a card afterward. She said she had been afraid that needing help made her a burden. She said she was learning that needing help was simply human, and that the people who had used her need against her were the ones who had failed, not her. I kept that card on my kitchen windowsill where I could see it in the morning. James received a smaller inheritance, held in a structure that could not be accessed early or used to secure a debt. He was still my son. That did not give him ownership of my decisions. I sold the Jubilee Roadhouse in the spring. 22 years of mornings in that backyard had given me a great deal, and I was grateful for them. But the house had started to feel less like home and more like something I was maintaining for other people's expectations of what my life should look like. I bought a smaller place in Dartmouth, near the water, with a view of the harbor and a kitchen that caught the light in the morning. Ellen came 3 days a week. She helped with the physiotherapy exercises and made sure I was eating properly, and never once asked what my savings looked like. Lucy came on Sundays and brought bread from the market on Gottingen Street and told me about her students. Once she asked whether I felt guilty for the test. I told her the truth. A test does not create a person's character, it only shows you what was already there. James came the following month without Tanya. He sat on the balcony overlooking the harbor and did not say much for a while. Then he told me that in the hours when he believed the money was gone, he had felt fear instead of love, and he had not known the difference until the fear was the only thing driving him. It was an honest answer. Honesty did not undo the damage, but it gave us somewhere to begin. I told him that trust was not a thing I could hand back because he asked for it. He would have to show up in ordinary ways over ordinary time and let it build on its own. He nodded. He came back the next week and helped me hang 2 paintings I hadn't gotten around to since moving in. He fixed a stiff kitchen drawer and left before dinner because he could see I was tired. He did not ask to be thanked for it. That was a beginning. My hip healed slowly through the spring and into early summer. By June I was walking the waterfront path without a cane, watching the ferry cross the harbor on clear mornings. I thought about the things money cannot protect you from, and I thought about the things it can. The distinction matters more than most people admit. Money had not bought me a better family, but it had bought me the freedom to stop bargaining with people who confused usefulness with ownership. And that, in the end, was the only transaction that mattered. Families do not break apart because of money. They break apart because of what certain people choose to do, the moment they believe the money is out of reach. The breaking in my family had already been happening quietly for years, long before I said a word in that hospital room. I had only chosen to see it clearly before it was too late to act on what I saw. The harbor looks different from a place that is fully yours. The water doesn't care what you own, but it shows you exactly what the sky is doing, and on a clear morning in Halifax, that is more than enough to begin again.